Welcome Pakistan Peace TV. This is Amar. Today, Pakistan China Study Center at Institute of Strategic Studies, Islamabad organized a seminar under Grand National Dialogue titled Pakistan and China Relation, addressed by Senator Mashahid. He talked briefly Pakistan-China relation. Pakistan and China relation have a good relation that for our friendship, for our lasting friendships. Let's see this program.
My friend and former ambassador to China has summed it up very well, the essence of the relationship. I would just like to start with two verses or quotations from the great poet of the East, IPRI. He had made this prediction 90 years ago. 90 years ago. देख मशरिक से उभरते हुए सूरज को देख. Oh, see the sun rising from the east. He talked of the resurgence of Asia. Today, that is a living reality. And then he talked about China. And this is 90 years ago when China was embroiled in civil war. China was going through the century of what they call century of humiliation. China was under occupation or control or domination or hegemony of foreign powers. And he said, "Gara khab chini sambalne lage, Himala ke chashme ubalne lage. Kya daur sarmayadari kya, tamasha dikha ke badari kya." And he says, springs of hope are emanating from the great Himalayas, and the great Chinese nation is rising from slumber. So it's amazing, look at the Christians in this prediction, and that is a living reality. So when we talk of Pakistan-China relations, I'd just like to very briefly give you the geopolitical context. Because geopolitics is a very important component of this relationship. When it started off in the 60s, and when now it has reached a new height and a new level, especially after the visit of the Prime Minister, which you just mentioned. And I think that when we look at the global landscape, there were three very important statements made in October, last month, by three world leaders, which should be taken note of. On 12th of October, while launching the national security strategy of the US, President Biden said that this is the decisive decade. Speaking to the World Club, which is a very important think tank of Russia, President Putin said on 27th October that this is the most dangerous decade after World War II. And President Xi Jinping, in his speech on 16th of October to the 20th Party Congress said, and I quote from that, which is very important, "There are momentous changes taking place in the world, the likes of which we have not seen in a century. And the world has entered a new period of turbulence and change, and there is a significant shift taking place in the international balance of power." So, looking at that, we are looking at a certain historic transformation, shift, and whenever there's change of this kind, almost tectonic change, there's bound to be turbulence, or what President Xi Jinping called high winds and choppy waters and dangerous storms, which are there in ground. I think I would sum up the global scenario in three, or regional, in three R's. There is a retrenchment of US clout and power in the region. It started in Afghanistan, and of course before the Iraq, after the war on terror ended. So the focus in the broader Muslim world, Middle East, is shifting of the US. Retrenchment is there. The focus is now more on Asia Pacific, or what they call Asia Pacific. Then there is the rise of China. And then there is the resurgence of Asia. And the Asian resurgence is very clear. I was last week in Singapore for a conference where they have organized a Think Asia forum of think tanks of Asia. And the keynote speaker was a Singaporean, a very renowned Singaporean diplomat, Kishore Mehbubani. He is former ambassador of Singapore to the United Nations. He's been dean of the Lee Kuan Yew Institute, and he wrote the famous book 2 years ago, "Has China Won?" ? And he said that the era of Western hegemony or Western domination in Asia is coming to an end. And we are seeing the dawn of the Asian century. So that is the most significant shift in the global balance of power. From the West to the East, ending of one phase and the dawn of the Asian century. And the Ukraine war has, I think, accentuated this North-South divide. You can see South, the global South as we call it, has by and large a different perspective than the global North on this issue. So that is the context in which we talk about Pakistan-China relations, which are, I think, quite unique and quite remarkable and quite unprecedented in the annals of contemporary diplomatic history, that a relationship between two neighboring states, unequal in size, with different social systems, with different background, and a relationship that has been, for the last 60 years, resilient, friction-free, and knit together, woven together by a congruence of interests and a compatibility of worldviews. With how we see the world, in terms of our values, believing in the international system, which is anchored in international law and the UN Charter, and how the interests of the two countries are so compatible. The bottom line of this relationship is very interesting, and I think I would like to give two quotes. One is a recent quote of Foreign Minister Wang Yi. I think it was in March 2019, and he was addressing this conference, joint comprehensive conference in Beijing of the Belt and Road Initiative and CPEC, joint mechanism for among political parties, and I was also there. Shah Mahmood Qureshi was also there. He said, no matter how things change in the region and the world, China will firmly support Pakistan's sovereignty, territorial integrity, unity and dignity under any circumstance. And I think our bottom line is also summed up by a former president of Pakistan, President Ayub Khan. You mentioned Mr. Bhutto. President Ayub Khan was the president and Mr. Bhutto was the foreign minister when the opening to China started. And remember, when we talk of today, they say balance, how will Pakistan do this? We have been through this path before. At that time, when we befriended China, China was seen as an enemy not only of the Soviet Union, but also the US together. Two superpowers were opposed to it. And we realized what was the point, but we took decisions which were in our best core national interest. And the turning point in our relationship, apart from the 1963 border agreement which was signed in March by Marshal Cheney and Mr. Bhutto, was 1965 war, when Pakistan, an ally of the US, we were sanctioned, and the US said we are neutral in the conflict between India and Pakistan. And China came to Pakistan's rescue and support in a very strong manner. After that visit, after that war, President Ayub went to Washington in, I think it was in November 65. And he had a rather stormy meeting with President Johnson, because that was the height of the Cold War and the peak of this relationship. And in fact, when he landed that day, there was a cartoon in the Washington Post by the famous cartoonist called Herb front page. And they said, they showed Ayub Khan visiting an obstetrician guy with glasses. And they said there's a song, they saw a map of Asia and the threat from Red China. And Ayub Khan is looking at his glasses. He says, I don't see any threat. So that was that summed up. That there's a looming threat, and they showed a map. This is a cartoon. It was a single wave, and Ayub Khan says, he looks at his glasses, I don't see any threat. Where is the threat? The threat from Red China. That was the cartoon. Johnson told him that, look here, Mr. President, you are flirting with our enemy. At that time, flirtation was a bad word. 60 years ago. Something The times have changed. So you're flirting with that category and run China and this and that. And this is not there. It was very, Yupan was very calm and I think very statesman-like. And I must say, I commend him. He's gone now, but his courage. He said, look here, Mr. President. If we have a problem with our relationship with the US, yes, we will damage our economy. But if you have a break with China, we'll damage our country and our national security. And that is not. I think that bottom line, what Ayub Khan enunciated in November 1965, in my view, is the bottom line where when we look at relationships vis-a-vis and talk of balance, that this is the core. China is the sheet anchor of Pakistan's defense, national security, diplomacy and economy. On that, there can be no compromise. It is a relationship which is not directed against it. It is a relationship which is based on compatibility of interests. And I agree with Ambassador Masood Khalid. Maybe in the first 1 or 2 years, this India factor was there. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, but no longer. The relationship stands on its own resilience because of the track record of trust, that confidence they have with each other, and the fact that they have stood by each other at all times on core interests. What does China bring to the table for Pakistan? I call it, China gives us international diplomatic air cover. On all international fora, UN Security Council, UN Suppliers, Nuclear Suppliers Group, G20, FATF, China is Pakistan's voice, protecting, preserving, promoting Pakistan's interests. When Modi annexed Kashmir, we went to the UN Security Council. How did we go? We were not a member. China. Twice we did that. FATF, China. Nuclear Suppliers Group, Obama instructed his team that before I leave office on 20th January 2017, India must be part of the Nuclear Suppliers Group. How did that not happen? China. UN Security Council, India is dying. Even yesterday I was reading, Jaishankar is going to Moscow today, and Americans are saying maybe he can play a role, and that's why India should be in the UN Security Council. China. So China has given Pakistan that time, yes, and that is a reciprocity. When Chairman Mao sent his ambassador to Pakistan, Geng Biao, General Geng Biao, he said, look after Pakistan, because Pakistan is China's window to the West, 1959. Window to the West. And Pakistan too. The Chinese period of isolation, we stood by China. And also, what is called China's soft southern underbelly, the security aspect, Xinjiang, Tibet region, where you have the separatist movement of Dalai Lama, who is living in India. And there are other people who are playing the Xinjiang card. I still remember an article by Leslie Gell in the New York Times. In 13th December 1991, New York Times, Leslie Gell, the title was Breaking China Apart. That if China does not fall in line on issues, then the US can play the ultimate card of kindling ethnic separatism. So when China talks of foreign conspiracies, it's not just a political ploy. There is a basis to that. There is a thinking that fault lines are there, we should exploit those. So it's very important. Pakistan is there to stand by China. And Pakistan is the only country in the world which fully supports China on all its core interests, unreservedly. Whether it's Taiwan, Tibet, Xinjiang, Hong Kong, South China Sea, Belt and Road Initiative, or China's peaceful rise, which we welcome, because that China's peaceful rise is a source of strength and a source of stability in the international system, and especially a source of strength for small and medium countries like Pakistan. So in that context, I think that these two developments which have taken place, one is the 20th Party Congress, very important. President Xi Jinping, I think, has shown strategic clarity. He gave a very clear statement on Taiwan. That is the red line. That China's international influence, appeal, and power to shape the world have risen markedly. That is important. And I think that sums up the change which is taking place in the world system. And secondly, on the issue, because there were feelings, that perhaps the Communist Party of China will become fat and flabby like the Communist Party of Soviet Union, with corruption, with weak leadership. I think the clarity which has come out of the 20th Party Congress is that China is very clearly on a certain direction, and that direction is going to strengthen China, make and ensure China's progress in the 21st century. And the way they have eliminated absolute poverty, the way they have reached out. And today you can see that out of 193 members of the United Nations, 130 countries have more trade with China than they have. So that shows that China today is a leader in globalization. And I'm also going next week to this COP27 in Egypt, and again on climate change also China has shown a lot of leadership. So I think this is a very important transition in the world that we are seeing. Pakistan-China relations, I think that the United States, I was in the US recently also, and it was a big conference which I spoke at College of William and Mary, which is close to Washington, Williamsburg. And that College of William and Mary has the largest data bank on Chinese projects. And they are monitoring 13,472 Chinese projects in all over the world. Each project. Who is funding it? What are the interest rates? What is the labor there? What is the stage of the project, and so forth. And it was at that conference I spoke. I said, in my view, there are more interests that align China and the United States than separate. And I said, even on Ukraine, China can be a friend, because China has not endorsed the Russian invasion and occupation of parts of the Ukraine. China will never do that because China has a principled position. And treating China as a threat, as an enemy, is something which is not in the interest of the US, not in the interest of the global system. In any case, I think if there is going to be competition, it should be healthy competition. US believes in free trade, and this kind of protectionism, this kind of singling out and trying to make an enemy is not something which the Asian countries will accept, or most of the developing countries will accept. And you can see that after the 20th Party Congress, who were the first visitors to China? The first was Vietnam, and Vietnam announced that we would never allow our territory or any foreign bases. And friendship with China is the top priority of Vietnamese foreign policy. Then Prime Minister Shabashti, and then Mr. Scholz, the Chancellor of Germany. And the Chancellor of Germany came with a top delegation of German executives. 100 executives wanted to come, but they had only place for 12 of them. Adidas came, BMW came, BioNTech came, everybody came. So it's very clear that Europe and others, they feel that this is not the time for a new Cold War. Pakistan is very clear. Our policy is not ideological. Our policy is very matter of fact and realistic. It is based on an understanding of our role in the region where we belong and our core national interests. And these are best protected by having a good, strong camaraderie with China, which is a consistent one. It's not new. That relationship helped America build their relationship with China. We were the bridge. So we feel that Pakistan's foreign policy is on the right side of history. And I'd like to conclude with just one thing, that in 1971, when the biggest turning point came in the global balance of power, 50 years later, there were last year, in 2021, there was a China Development Forum. And I was asked to represent Pakistan, and Dr. Kissinger also came online from the US. This was 50 years of Kissinger's visit to China from Chennai, 8th of July 1971, if he was a PIA. And he appreciation to Pakistan and the Pakistani leadership and the Pakistani diplomatic service for the historic role they played. And let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, because we forget history, there were just 3 people who did all that. President Yahya Khan, Foreign Secretary Sultan Muhammad Khan, and our ambassador in Washington, Agha Hilali Sahab, elder brother of Agha Shahi Sahab. Just 3 people. No ISSI, no intelligence, no anything. 2 foreign service officials and 1 military. How they pulled it off secretly, without everything, and it was the biggest turning point in global politics. So I think that I must commend the Foreign Service. You have had a track record of top-level professionalism, which is delivered, and some of them are sitting on both sides of the table. They are also so, in that context, ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan-China relations are on track. You mentioned about the very important agreement on R&D. I think the most important also was CPEC 2 is now being launched. A lot of people were signing the obituary of CPEC in the last few years. Oh, CPEC is gone, it's not doable, it's not possible. They don't understand the nature of the relationship. In one of the visits, and this was told to me by Mr. Gohar Ayub, when Ayub Khan Sahab went